Corporal Davis was killed while filling canteens at what should have been a safe position. The sniper had been watching, waiting, calculating. Standard American doctrine called for volume of fire, locate the enemy position and saturate it with rifle and machine gun rounds. But aiming with iron sights into the dark green wall of jungle vegetation was like shooting at ghosts. The Japanese would fire once from 800 yards away, then vanish before counterfire could arrive.
Second Lieutenant John George understood something his fellow officers didn't. The solution wasn't more bullets, it was better vision and superior accuracy. George had brought his personal Winchester Model 70 from civilian life, a rifle he'd used for long-range hunting. The weapon featured a 24-inch barrel glass designed for competitive target shooting that could turn the blurry jungle into a high-definition landscape. The mocking stopped on February 1st when George took his sniper section into the field. Intelligence indicated Japanese positions west of the Matanakaw River. Not snipers, they were told, just infantry stragglers who hadn't yet evacuated. The intelligence was catastrophically wrong.
George paired with a spotter named Corporal Hayes and established position on high ground overlooking a trail network. By 0720 hours, they'd identified enemy movement. What happened over the next 3 days would become the stuff of legend, though the official record would remain deliberately vague. The Japanese officer corps operated under a fatal tradition: samurai swords worn as symbols of rank and authority. To the Imperial Army, these swords represented honor, lineage, and the warrior spirit. To John George, peering through 8-power magnification from concealed positions, they were identification markers that stood out like beacon fires. Japanese officers believed they were safe at distances beyond 700 yards, operating from positions the Americans couldn't effectively engage. They studied maps openly, directed troops with hand signals, and moved with the confidence of men who thought themselves beyond reach. They were wrong. The first kill came at approximately 0830 hours on February 1st. A Japanese captain, identifiable by his sword and the way other soldiers deferred to him, stood near a forward assembly area studying terrain maps. The distance, 820 yards. George calculated wind drift, adjusted for the steep downward angle, compensated for the tropical heat affecting air density, and squeezed the trigger. The .30-06 round traveled at 2,800 feet per second, arriving at the target in approximately 1.2 seconds. The officer collapsed before the sound of the shot reached him. Confusion rippled through Japanese positions. Officers began scanning for the shooter, but George had already relocated to a secondary position 400 yards away. The fundamental advantage of bolt-action precision over semi-automatic volume fire became apparent. One perfectly aimed shot from an unexpected angle created more chaos than 100 rounds fired from known positions. By noon, George had killed 3 more officers. Each shot came from a different position. Each target fell at ranges between 700 and 900 yards, distances where the M1 Garand's effective accuracy degraded significantly, but where George's scoped Winchester remained lethal. The Japanese command structure along that sector began to disintegrate. Junior officers were suddenly in command of units they'd never led. Communication broke down. Tactical coordination evaporated. But the most devastating effect was psychological. By the afternoon of February 2nd, surviving Japanese officers had begun removing all rank insignia, abandoning their swords, desperately trying to blend in with common soldiers. The invisible death that reached out from impossible distances had broken something fundamental in the enemy command psychology. The belief that leaders were untouchable, that distance provided safety, that the jungle concealed all. February 3rd brought a new challenge. Japanese forces, now aware they were being systematically hunted, changed their tactics. Officers moved only during twilight hours. They stopped using binoculars or maps in open positions. Some began wearing enlisted uniforms without any distinguishing marks. The targets became harder to identify, the shooting windows narrower, the pressure more intense. George's position was compromised at 14:20 hours when a Japanese sniper spotted muzzle flash from his previous shot. Enemy fire began impacting within 20 yards of his concealment. Hayes, his spotter, took shrapnel to the left arm. The situation cascaded toward disaster. Pinned down, partially exposed, with Japanese infantry beginning to maneuver toward their position. The bolt-action rifle that others had mocked suddenly became a liability. While M1 Garand operators could lay down sustained suppressive fire, George's Winchester required manual cycling after each shot, slower, more deliberate, offering no margin for error. Against multiple targets closing the distance, volume of fire wins. But George wasn't trying to win a firefight. He was trying to survive long enough to kill the one target that mattered, the Japanese officer coordinating the assault. Through his scope, George identified the threat. 700 yards distant, partially concealed behind a fallen log, a figure wearing no rank insignia but carrying binoculars and directing troop movements with hand signals. An officer, disguised but identifiable by behavior rather than uniform. The wind had shifted, now gusting from the northeast at approximately 8 miles per hour. The downward angle had increased because George's position was elevated. He had perhaps 20 seconds before enemy infantry reached firing range. His spotter was bleeding, unable to provide wind calls. The target was partially obscured. George made the shot. The officer dropped. Japanese infantry, suddenly without tactical coordination, halted their advance. The momentary confusion gave George and Hayes the window they needed to withdraw under covering fire from a Marine patrol that had heard the engagement. February 4th marked the culmination of George's counter-sniper operations. By dawn, he had killed 8 Japanese officers over 3 days. But the most important target still remained. A senior officer believed to be coordinating sniper operations across the entire northwestern sector. Intelligence placed this officer near Cape Esperance, approximately 900 yards behind Japanese forward positions. The distance was at the extreme edge of effective range, even for George's precision rifle. The shot would require perfect atmospheric conditions, flawless wind reading, and an element of timing that bordered on luck. George established position on a coral outcropping that provided elevation advantage but offered almost no concealment. He would get one shot before his position was compromised. Through his Unertal scope, he glassed the target area. At 10:47 hours, movement. A Japanese officer emerged from a command tent, unmistakable despite the lack of sword. The way subordinates surrounded him, the immediate attention he commanded, the maps he carried. The range? 870 yards. Wind? Variable, gusting between 6 and 10 miles per hour from the left quarter. Temperature? 94 degrees Fahrenheit, creating heat mirage that distorted the sight picture. The target was visible for perhaps 15 seconds before he would return to cover. George made the calculations that only a lifetime of precision shooting can teach. He aimed 18 inches high and 2 feet to the left to compensate for bullet drop and wind drift. He controlled his breathing, feeling his heartbeat slow. The scope's crosshairs settled on empty air above and to the side of the target, a hold that looked absurd to anyone watching, but was mathematically perfect for the ballistics involved. The Winchester Model 70 roared. The .306 round traveled its arc through humid tropical air. 9/10 of a second later, the Japanese officer fell. The ninth kill in 48 hours. The impossible made routine through superior equipment, exceptional skill, and the kind of cold-blooded patience that separates snipers from riflemen.
The impact of George's 9 confirmed officer kills rippled far beyond simple body count. Japanese command and control in the northwestern sector collapsed entirely. Units that had operated with disciplined coordination began making tactical errors. The sniper threat that had paralyzed American advance for weeks diminished dramatically as enemy marksmen lost their command structure. George's sniper section continued operations through early February. By February 9th, they had eliminated 74 confirmed enemy combatants, a conservative count that included only kills where the body could be directly observed. 0 American casualties during sniper operations under George's command. On February 7th, George himself was wounded, a Japanese rifleman's bullet striking his left shoulder. The wound was serious but not fatal. He was evacuated for medical treatment.
The irony wasn't lost on anyone who'd witnessed those first days in January. The mail-order toy and antique bolt action had outperformed every semi-automatic weapon in the sector. George's success broke the psychological paralysis that had gripped his battalion. He proved that one well-aimed shot could suppress the enemy more effectively than random volume fire. After the battle, the Army tasked George with establishing a sniper school to teach precision marksmanship and fieldcraft skills. His experiences were later documented in his book Shots Fired in Anger, which became a critical military text, arguing for the return of trained sharpshooters to infantry doctrine. The lessons learned from his Winchester Model 70 would eventually influence the development of dedicated sniper programs across the U.S. military.
No medals were awarded for those 9 officer kills. George's official record mentions his service and his wounding, but the specific counter-sniper operations remained deliberately vague in after-action reports. The military establishment was uncomfortable acknowledging that a civilian sporting rifle had outperformed standard-issue weapons. Recognition came instead through the quiet respect of men who'd watched him work. Marines who'd seen the impossible made real through skill, patience, and a bolt-action rifle everyone had mocked. The Winchester Model 70 that killed 9 Japanese officers in 48 hours serves as a reminder that in war, innovation and individual skill can sometimes matter more than doctrine and standardization. John George's story represents just one chapter in the vast, complex narrative of the Pacific War, a chapter that almost went unrecorded because it challenged accepted wisdom about equipment and tactics.
This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to WWII Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.